Okay. My name is Abhishek, and I'm part of the Ads Manager platform team here at GroundTruth. I would like to welcome you all for the Omni-Channel Strategy webinar session today. I'll be the host for the today's session, and I'm going to also give you a demo on how to activate these products on Ads Manager during the session. Before we start, just want to lay out the housekeeping rules. So all the participants are muted for now. A recording will be sent to all the attendees shortly after this session. Questions submitted through our Q&A button will be addressed during our Q&A session at the end. If you do have any follow-up questions, you can email adexpert@groundtruth.com, or if you're an existing tenant on Ads Manager, you can reach out to your account executive or platform specialist. At the end, we'll also provide you a post-webinar survey. Please do fill it up so that we can improve the sessions moving forward. Okay, so this is the agenda for today's discussion. What is Omnichannel Strategy? Why is it important? What are GroundTruth's differentiators? What to keep in mind when you activate an Omnichannel Strategy campaign on Ads Manager? And then I'll give you a quick product demo on how to effectively run a campaign on Ads Manager, and we will end with the Q&A session. Omnichannel strategy. What do you mean by omnichannel strategy? I think omnichannel strategy is pretty imperative these days. It's a strategy that allows brands, advertisers, agencies, and marketeers to reach consumers seamlessly across all different channels and formats. If you think about it, when GroundTruth launched the self-serve platform in 2017, we were purely mobile focused. And now you can leverage our technology, targeting tactics, audiences, and track visits, and extend it to desktop and connected TV as a way to reach customers through Ads Manager platform. Why is it important? I mean, if you look at the grand scheme of things, consumers own more than one device to consume media. So essentially, if you can target all those devices, you can stay on top of mind throughout the consumer journey. Secondly, you can amplify your message by targeting the same users across multiple devices. Or if your main objective is to target a certain device, such as CTV or desktop or mobile, you can do it based upon your KPI requirements. Thirdly, this will help you to tell your brand story through sequential messaging across various devices in different possible formats. So just to give you an example, if you have an auto dealership client and their main goal is to drive visitors to their store or to their dealership, you can start off with a strategy wherein you would basically talk about selling used cars through mobile, and then maybe talk about the services such as, hey, do you want a car wash on desktop, and run a campaign about, do you want an oil change through CTV? So basically you can capture those critical moments through sequential messaging, and ideally you would get a better conversion process at the end. So what's the GroundTruth differentiator when it comes to omnichannel strategy? So if you look at our Ads Manager platform, you might see a huge difference when it comes to setup, especially for existing users. So what we have done is we want to make sure that the user journey would be seamless when they select any sort of device type for targeting. So essentially, when you would create an ad group, you would basically see device types show up as it is, like mobile, desktop, and CTV. And you can essentially create specific ad groups for each of those device types. Secondly, you can also track and measure campaigns, measure ad groups pertaining to single device type based upon your KPIs. For example, you can see which device type is providing the highest CTR, the best impression rate, or the best visitation rate. And then you can optimize the campaign based on those criteria. You can also enable the GroundTruth audiences to reach the right users on each of those device types, and then retarget the same audiences on other devices. Thirdly, as you know, GroundTruth Ads Manager is a performance-oriented platform, and in-store visitation is our bread and butter. So what we have made sure is, irrespective of any device type, you can still track visits on all the device types, no matter what you're targeting. So that's basically some of our differentiator features. Now, when it comes to activating a campaign on Ads Manager, there are certain things to keep in mind. Currently, desktop and connected TV is not available in self-serve. Having said that, if you would like to run a campaign targeting those devices, please reach out to adexpert@groundtruth.com and we will enable those features for you. Just so you know, just to make sure that all your campaigns are delivered in full, we would expect you to share the campaign information to your account executive or platform specialist or the ad expert at GroundTruth.com so that we can provide you what would be the optimal strategies or the best way to set up your campaign on our end. Secondly, most of the targeting tactics are available except on-premise targeting and weather targeting. Hopefully, in future, we will have this available as well. On CTV and desktop, demographic targeting is not available. When it comes to location filters, as you know, with mobile, you can be as granular as address, lat long. However, with desktop and CTV, we are currently restricted to zip code, DMA, and state. When it comes to bidding, both of them bids on CPM. The desktop CPMs are similar to mobile. It starts at $350. And when it comes to CTV, the CPM starts at $27. With that in mind, I would give you a quick demo on how to activate these products on Ads Manager once it's enabled to your account. So I just want to give you an example use case so that you can understand what we're trying to achieve with this campaign. So the objective is we are trying to help a pizza store in New York to increase brand awareness, drive in-store visitors, and improve website engagement. And we will be targeting, we'll be using real-time location as well as audience targeting strategies across all the three device types, mobile, desktop. And for this use case, we are taking into consideration a campaign budget of $5,000 per month. With that, let me share my screen. Awesome. So I know we do have quite a few users who haven't used our Ads Manager platform yet. So I'm going to give you a hands-on approach on how to effectively create a campaign and enable all these strategies. So this is our campaign dashboard. So I'm going to start off with new campaign. So I'll provide platform, Omni-Channel. So you can provide a campaign name. And the next step is ad group budget and campaign budget. In this case, because we want to determine which device types are doing essentially well based upon your KPI, I would suggest you to opt for ad group budgets. However, if you have a campaign wherein you don't care about which devices are being served against, then you can opt for campaign budget. But if you would like to see reports broken down by each individual ad groups and then determine what would be the best strategy moving forward, then I would recommend to start off with ad group budget. So I'll select ad group budget and click save. Now with this, as I said, all the three targeting tactics are available for mobile, but when it comes to desktop and CTV, only location and audiences are available. So I'll start off with location. I'll start off with audience for mobile. So yeah, in this case, for the existing users, you would see some changes in the campaign setup process. Initially, we had only 4 steps, but now you would see an additional step in the device type section. So I'll start off with mobile. Go on next. Now in this case, I'll select audience mobile. Again, it's always recommended to name your ad group as per your naming convention on what you do on any other DSP medium. So I would suggest you to follow the same criteria here. Now, because we're trying to run a campaign for a pizza store in New York, we would want to select relevant audiences which is kind of similar to the pizza store. So I'm going to use some of their competitors like Domino's. In this case, maybe Pizza Hut, and maybe one more brand to Pizza Inn. Okay, so keep in mind we have majority of the big national brands already blueprinted in our system. So whenever you want to target any brand, you can obviously search in this. If you can't find any specific brand, you can click on Add New Location Group, which I'll be talking in a bit. But yeah, most of the brands are already blueprinted. Then let's also use a behavioral segment such as pizza lovers. So now you have the necessary targeting set, and considering the fact that this location is in New York, so we will only target these audiences in New York City. So I'll choose New York City. And now, as I mentioned in the objective, the goal here is not only to improve brand awareness, but also to improve online engagement and to track in-store visitors. So what we want to do is we would want to select real world drive to location here. So now, because it's a single location, we would want to create a custom location group. So let me click on Add New Location Group, and this would redirect you to Location Manager. So Location Manager, in essence, is basically a database of all the addresses you would insert into your location group. So just so you know, you can create your competitive location group, you can create your own store location group. So in this case, let me create a sample location group. Platform, webinar, pizza, drive-thru. So once you create a unique name and a description, you can click on Continue. You will see the new location group created here, right? So you would essentially click on this. Once you click on this, then if you go to the right-hand corner, you will see Add Locations. You will click on this and select any ways to add a location to this location group. So ideally, if you have more than 10 locations, you can upload the location file and add those locations and upload it. Or you can create a single location manually. For this use case, I've already created a location group called Pete's Pizza New York with this location. Now with this, there's another good prop here. You can also click on this button to actually see the blueprint of that location as well. So moving forward, whenever you create a location group, you can visualize the blueprint on your end. Now that you've created this location group, I'll go back to Ads Manager and type in the location group name, which is Pete's Pizza New York, right? Now, if you look at the setup, you have added the targeting criteria for this campaign, and you have seen what you want to achieve from the campaign. You would want to track in-store visits as well. So with that, all the things would be straightforward. I've enabled demographics, device targeting. And for this case, optimization strategy, I'll keep it as delivery. And then at the end, if you want to build custom audience for retargeting, right? So you would then provide a unique name. Usually what I recommend my clients is basically to use the same ad group name as possible so that you can understand what audiences to select in your retargeting audience set. So this is the third portion of your overall campaign setup. I'll click on next. Now comes the creative section. As you know, I think we have already had a separate webinar purely for creative. So if you have any more questions on creative, I would really advise you to take a look at that webinar. But for now, if you want to upload a creative in this section, you can either upload it through as a static banner, image, or a GIF. You can upload as a script, as a VAS tag, or if you don't have any creatives, you can always leverage our HTML5 template. For this particular use case, I'm going to use a sample creative. So as you know, I've already uploaded a few creatives to the repository. So I'll choose one of these. So once you have added the creative, you just click on the creative and then provide the click-through URL. So I'm going to use petespizza.com. Along with that, if you want to use our landing page template, you can just enable this and you can make some changes to your landing page template. Again, we have specifically dealt with respect to landing page template in our creative webinar. So again, if you have any questions, I would ask you to revert to that webinar. But for the time being, this would be basically the sample creative setup. Once you've done this, you would click on Save. Okay. You can also add some impression frequency cap. For example, if you want to just show this ad to 10 times a user in a day, you can apply those logic in this section. But for now, I'm just keeping it as it is. Then the final step in your campaign setup process is basically assigning the bid price. So usually when it comes to mobile, our minimum bid price is $350. And in this case, we will run the campaign for about 40 days. So I'm gonna extend until September 30th. And considering the fact that the campaign budget was $5,000, I'm gonna put $1,500 towards mobile tactic, right? Now with that, you can save the ad group. So the first part of your omni-channel strategy has been achieved with mobile targeting. You would go back and now let's create an ad group for desktop. So I'll click on new ad group and I'll again choose target by audience. Now in this case, I would choose desktop. And again, this would be the new feature for existing users because it's a new process altogether. Great. Now, in this case, I'm going to follow the same process. I'm going to name it as audience desktop. And I'll most probably use the same audiences which I've selected for mobile. So I'm going to start with Domino's, Pizza Inn, Pizza Hut, and maybe Pizza Lovers. And again, there are a plethora of audience segments that you can select. I think we have about 300 to 400 audience segments spread across brand, category, behavior. So you can choose any one of those. Again, in this case, I'm going to choose New York City. Maybe I can choose New York as a DMA. So again, keep in mind, the stark difference what you would find between mobile and desktop is in desktop, you will be able to select DMA, state, or zip code. So for example, on mobile, you can do address, lat long, or even like on-premise location. So in this case, if you're planning to do zip codes, I would recommend you to target multiple zip codes so that we have pretty good ways to hit your delivery of the campaign. Now, again, in this case, this is a unique differentiator because along with desktop, we can also track in-store visits, which is a great tool set to have, especially if your client has a brick and mortar location, which is the case in this example. So I'm going to use the same address, which is the Pete's Pizza location group. So yeah, so the targeting is set, the location filter has been updated, and the drive to has also been set up. Now again, if you come to the optimization strategy, I'm going to stick to delivery, but if you want to choose click, you can always choose click as well. And if you want to choose for click, you can enable the click-through CTR here as well. Again, I highly recommend to opt for auto because that would not only help you with a better click-through rate, but also help you with better pacing of your campaign. For the time being, because we want to reach as many users, as many target consumers as possible through this campaign, I'm going to opt for delivery. Now, along with this, you would see there's a lot of options that are missing, such as demographic targeting, and your audience building as well. So typically with desktop, you won't be able to create an audience for retargeting, but you can use the retargeted audience created from mobile and then use it for desktop as well. You would find all the retargeting audience under this segment option. Okay. Now I'll move on to the next section, which is the creative. Now in the creative, again, if you look at desktop, we have image, script, and video. So in this case, I would again use image, but if you have script or video, which is a Vasta, you can still use this solution. So again, I would choose a sample creative, 300 by 250. Now, another difference you would find between mobile and desktop is you can provide the click-through URL, but you won't be able to leverage the landing page template. Obviously, the dynamics of a landing page template in mobile is very native to mobile, and so you can't do the same thing for desktop, but you can use your click-through URL, you can use your UTM codes, all those things as a suffix to your URL as well. Let's save this. One other thing that I forgot to mention is we also have a text overlay function. So if you want to add some text to provide some intent to the user, you can use something called as a distance unit, and away. So you would see a small dialog box that opens here. You can just expand it and place it wherever you want. So what this essentially does is, if there's a customer who's like 1 mile away from your store and he sees this ad, this would basically automatically changes to the user's GPS location. So however, in the case of desktop, it would be different, but in the case of mobile, we will be able to find the GPS coordinates and make sure it takes the closest location of the user and then attributes it. Now with the creative section done, you would click on save and go to the next section. So as I've explained in the deck, the CPM for desktop will remain the same as mobile. It's 350, and we're gonna use the same timeline. And in the case of desktop, I'll be using $1,500 as the budget. Okay, again, it's a pretty straightforward process. There's no change in the campaign setup. You can literally set up your campaign in minutes. So I'm gonna save this, and I'll go back to the campaign dashboard, and now we can see a mobile and a desktop ad group created. Lastly, I'm gonna set up a CTV ad group. So for CTV, I'm gonna use target by location and opt for geo targets. Okay, so again, you would choose CTV here. And just so you know, there's been a lot of questions around CTV. When we talk about CTV, it is the connected TV, and these are large screen TVs, which you find in household. This does not include small screen OTT supply. This purely includes large screen CTV. So now in this case, I'm going to do location and CTV. So now with this, I'm going to use New York as state targeting. And then on top of that, you can also add multiple zip codes if you would like. So maybe something like this, something like this. So basically just to add a bunch of zip codes. And again, keep in mind, if you look at the targeting, the location filter here, it's restricted to DMA, zip code, and state, just to make sure that we can provide you the best delivery and performance on your campaign. Also to keep in mind, CTV supply is constrained as compared to mobile and desktop. So the more granular your targeting would be with CTV, it would be a bit hard to get the best performance and pacing. So I would recommend to have a broader targeting for CTV as compared to mobile and desktop. So once you have done with the location filters, again, you would then basically select the location that you want to track visits against. So you would use the same location, which is Pete's Pizza, New York. And again, you could see it's the same as desktop. You won't be able to use any sort of demographic or technographic targeting, and you won't be able to save any audiences as such for the time being. So with that, you would go to the next section, right? And interestingly, when you look at CTV, there's only one option, which is video. So you would have to basically use a VASTag URL. Let me just pull up a VASTag URL. So you would copy this VASTag URL. So as I said, we are already certified with about 15 tag vendors. So if you go to any of those tag vendors, they would basically give you a script for your MP4 file, and then you can directly upload it into the system. If you don't have a MP4 file, we can recommend a few suggestions on how to build a VASTag. So ideally, you would have to insert a VASTag, which includes our GroundTruth macros. So if you could look at creative ID or the campaign ID. So these are specific macros that needs to be inserted so that it gets recorded on our end. So once that is done, you would click on save. You don't have to provide the click-through URL because usually the click-through URL is embedded within the VASTag URL. So it's not a mandatory feature as well. So you click on save. And the ads manager, the video is saved to the creative. Again, you can apply frequency cap, you can apply a bunch of additional, you can also upload a bunch of additional video assets as well. We have quite a few video assets, which is usually in 16:9 aspect ratio. So if you have 3 to 4 assets, you can upload all of them, again, for better pacing and delivery. With that, you would go to the next option. Now, when it comes to CTV, because it's large screen, the CPMs are pretty much are usually higher as compared to mobile and desktop. So on our end, the minimum CPM starts at $27. Okay, so I'm going to use the same thing here until the end of September. Because the campaign budget was $5,000, I'm going to devote about $2,000, the remaining $2,000 towards CTV here. And you save the ad. Okay. Now, in this way, you have basically created a campaign which follows an omni-channel strategy, wherein you're targeting similar audiences or similar tactics across 3 different mediums, which is mobile, desktop, and CTV. And now, once the campaign starts running, you will be able to see all the metrics captured in this section, which is impressions, clicks, visits, and you can also add other metrics which are not included here, but you can also, for example, video quartile metrics for CTV would be very beneficial. So you can basically measure all the key results in the campaign dashboard itself. Again, this is not a set template as such. This is basically an example. You can literally create 2 ad groups for every device type. Location audience, location audience, location audience for each mobile, desktop, and CTV. If you basically want to gauge and determine what sort of targeting tactic actually performs best, because targeting tactic can change based upon the location, based upon the advertiser, based upon the consumers you're reaching. So it's really imperative that you can have as many ad groups as possible so that you can basically make the best use of our targeting strategies. Secondly, it's not mandatory to create ad groups. You can also create different campaigns as well. But if you want to follow an omni-channel strategy wherein you want to see how each ad group is performing, then I would recommend to go with this thing. So this is basically the setup. I will jump back to the slides here and then go over any questions we have. So let me look at the questions. Okay, so we have a question from Kyle. What options are under the API type dropdown? Great, so let me just answer this question here. So I'll go back to Ads Manager. It's a really good question, Kyle. So ideally, in the creative, let me go back to mobile. So the question is, what options are available in this API type? So we have VPaid 1.2, MRAID 1.2, and ARMA. The default option is none. So that means that most of the creatives will be run on MRAID inventory because that's the standard template being used by all the app developers or the creative developers out there. So having said that, if you have any specific campaigns that run on VPaid or VPaid, which is very rare nowadays, because MRAID 2 is the most default and most standardized API type, or if you have any campaign or any creative running on ARMA, then you can select either of those. But if you can select none, or if you select MRAID 2, it would basically run on all the inventory types. So the default option would be none. Okay. Now we have the next question from Stuart. CTV, you use geo-targeting, but could you have used behavioral and brand audience targeting? Correct. You could literally use any sort of targeting you would need. I just use it as a preference so that we can have a good distribution of location and audience. But yeah, as I said, if you have a targeting, you can literally create location and audience for every device type. So you can have CTV, desktop, and mobile. So that would literally be 6 ad groups. So if you want to test which one performs best based upon your client's KPI or based upon your own KPI, then you can then optimize towards that. What does enable store visit list mean? Okay, you have a keen eye to it. So basically, this is not available for external clients yet because I'm an internal user. We have this, But the idea is, if you want to offer a store visitation list study for your client, we do have an internal solution, and we are currently planning to revamp our internal solution. So the idea is, hopefully in future, this option would be available, and if you select this option, we would provide you an store visitation list study. So we would basically take into consideration a control group and an exposed group, run a series of tests on your campaign, and then you'll be figure out what would be the case study because of running this campaign. So that is something that we are working on, but unfortunately, it's not available for you as a feature on Ads Manager. Hope that answers your question. We have one more question from Crystal. Can you review VAS tag setup again for CTV? Of course. So let me go back to Ad Creatives, CTV. So ideally, and I think this is something that we can send you as a follow-up. So this is basically a VAS tag URL. So what would happen is, there are a bunch of vendors out there. So you can think of DCM, which is the most preferred vendor in the creative management space. So you might have heard of script tags, right? So like a JavaScript tag or a HTML script tag. Similarly, in order to run a video, we would have to upload a VAS tag. So the idea here is, if you work with DCM, you can just work with DCM and tell them that, hey, I want to run a VAS tag on GroundTruth. They would provide you a VAS tag template directly to run on GroundTruth. Having said that, if you're not running with any VAS tag vendors, you can reach out to us, and we do have an internal solution wherein we work with Celtra. But again, that is something that we would have to run by our team internally. If you don't have any creative, and if you want to leverage CTV and run a VAS tag, and you only have an MP4 file, we can provide you a VAS tag URL for the initial few use cases to run a campaign. But having said that, outside of that, we would also recommend some of our vendors. And it's not too expensive, it's pretty cost effective. So as a follow-up, just to make sure you have a pretty good understanding about how to add a VAS tag URL or how to implement a VAS tag URL, we would provide you the steps so that you can reach out to the vendor and get hold of the VAS tag URL. Or else, there are a few free vendors as well. I can't think of the name on top of my head, but I think we would provide you some more information so that it's handy for you in building these VAS tags in future. Moving forward, I think we also have plans to provide an option for users to directly upload MP4 files. I know it makes everyone's lives easier. So that is something that we are in the works, and hopefully sometime in Q4 or early next year, we will have that option available. But until then, VAS tag would be the best way to run video ads on our platform. Hopefully I was able to answer that question, Crystal. I don't see the impression projection sections. Okay, sorry, another question from Josette. I don't see the impression projection section. Is that available? So let me just cancel this. So I'm assuming, Josette, you're talking about this section, the estimated result section. That should be available for all the self-serve clients. So if you're unable to see that section, please reach out to adexpert@groundtruth.com or to the account executive team or the platform specialist, and we'll make sure that is enabled. You should be able to see, when you enlarge this button, you should be able to see where you're basically running this, targeting this campaign. So you can literally see all these things. But if you're unable to see this, please reach out to us and we'll make sure that gets added to your section. Great. Any more questions? Thank you, Stuart. And one other thing that I wanted to highlight here is basically the strategy, right? So you would be able to see, from a report standpoint, you would be able to see all the reports, what you see on a mobile campaign for audience, mobile, and CTV. And secondly, if you want to make any changes to the campaign, you can make any changes in this section by clicking on this wheel button. And yes, So let me go back to the screen here. So we still have a few minutes, so I want to make sure, I want to open it for any additional questions so that all your questions or any issues are being answered in this platform. Great. I know we can still wait for like 3 to 4 minutes so that if you do have any specific questions, you can please reach out to us. Ideally, as I mentioned in the housekeeping rules, we will be sending out a poll survey. So would really appreciate if you could fill out that survey, as that would help not only us, but also our marketing team to provide you a better experience moving forward. Sorry, the survey was provided you on the webinar, my bad. It's at the bottom of the control bar on the Zoom. So if you could just provide those, fill in that survey, that would be really helpful. So it's in the bottommost section of your Zoom box. Great. We have one more question from Stuart. What are the creative specs for the MP4 maximum size length? Another great question, Stuart. So our creative specs follow the aspect ratio of 16:9. So as long as you can get any specs which fall within that aspect ratio, we should be able to ingest them on the platform. Maximum size and length. So as of now, we are willing to take on 15-second and 30-second videos, not more than that. And the maximum size, I think it's 50 MB, but let me revert back and provide you the exact details. I think as a follow-up, along with the respective VAS tag vendors, we would also provide you the size and as well as the length so that it's handy for you in building these creatives moving forward. Great. So we still have about 3 minutes. So if you have any questions, do reach out to us. We are pretty excited about CTV and desktop. We are already seeing some really good results coming in from CTV. And again, just the fact that we can track in-store visits from CTV and desktop is a huge game changer in the marketplace, because right now there are other vendors who provide visitation on mobile. So just the ability to track visits using desktop and CTV will help you just close the loop from a marketing objective standpoint. So it's a really handy product or a targeting feature to have in your overall marketing landscape. Okay, guys, I think we don't have any more questions. I would thank you all for attending this session. I hope this was really helpful to you. And again, we have a series of webinars session that has been done in the past. So you can also take a look at those sessions as well if you do have any specific questions. Okay, we still have one question coming in from Stuart. How do you track visitation for desktop CTV? Great, a great question. So what we tend to do is we work with the vendor across device vendor. What they would do is they would basically map mobile IDs into respective cookies or CTV IDs, right? So that's how we would target users in the first place. And if any one person from that household makes a visit to the store, we would basically match back that desktop cookie or CTV ID to a mobile advertising ID. And that's how we attribute visit, one-on-one visit to that particular store. Keep in mind, let's consider if in a household there are 4 people and we were able to track visits from one user, we would just restrict to one user. We don't want to calculate additional visits coming from the same household within a look back window of 14 days. So that's how we use, that's the methodology we use for tracking visitation. So we work with a vendor, a cross device gap vendor, who basically match a mobile device ID to a cookie ID to a CTV ID, and that's basically a cyclic process. So hope I was able to answer your question, Stuart. Great. We have one more question coming from Crystal. Is a monthly budget of $3K for clients reasonable for marketing? Again, it depends from client to client. Let's consider if a client has a single location, like what we discussed today. I think $3,000 is a really good, is a reasonable budget for marketing if you want to split across mobile, desktop, and CTV. We have seen cases where a client is willing to spend $10,000 purely for CTV as well, because keep in mind, CTV has a $27 bid, which means that you can hit about 1,000 impressions for $27. So if you want to hit about 100,000 impressions over a period of 1 month or 2 months, then I would say a higher budget is required. But having said that, if a client has a single location, then $3,000 is more than sufficient. But if a client has 10 to 15 locations and they want to track visits to each location, then I would suggest having a $1,000 budget or a $2,000 budget per location per month to be a good starting point for us to provide the best performance across their campaigns. So hopefully I was able to answer your question, Crystal. Okay, guys, with that, this would be a wrap of the webinar session. Thank you so much for attending, and we will be sending out the recording tomorrow. So hopefully that should, hopefully you can look at the recording and run a campaign on Ads Manager. And if you need access to this, please reach out to our ad expert at GroundTruth.com team, and they will be able to help you out. Thank you, and have a great day.